What in the world went wrong with the CJ Abrams trade to the San Francisco Giants? Let's talk about it right here on Locked On Giants.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, y'all? I'm Alan Sales. Welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Now, thanks to you, the #1 sports podcast network. On the show, we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that combines passion, analytics with the eye test, and a little bit of fun. I'm from the Bay Area, but I live in Sacramento now, and I host a show on Sacktown Sports 1140, as well as emceeing Sacramento River Cats games. All in all, I'm lucky enough to cover a team I've been a fan of all my life. Today, we are discussing what in the world went wrong with the CJ Abrams missed trade. Casey Schmitt, speaking of CJ Abrams and the infield, Casey Schmitt, should the Giants give him a chance at earning his stripes at second base if they don't feel like he's already done so? And last but not least, another prospect list, but this one from MLB.com. This is one of the big boys, and you have a very, very interesting surprise on this list that we will discuss when we get there. All right. So let's get to it. The CJ Abrams trade that never was. I remember watching a 30-30 episode back in the day, the best that never was. The CJ Abrams trade, the trade that never was. So this is from Andrew Baggerly of The Athletic. Giants rebuffed after making aggressive pitch for Nationals CJ Abrams. That's from his source, and this is how he breaks it down. With their options thinking out and just 2 weeks remaining before players report to spring training, the Giants recently turned up the aggression to get something done on the trade market. According to Major League sources, they signaled their openness to include highly regarded teenage shortstop prospect Josuar Gonzalez in a package for Washington Nationals infielder CJ Abrams. The result was another stalled trade pursuit and perhaps, if ownership permits, a pivot back to free agency. So this happened right before they ended up going and getting Harrison Bader. So maybe those two things are connected. The Giants and Nationals were unable to agree on a fair return for Abrams, a 25-year-old shortstop who was an all-star in 2024, posted a 111 OPS plus last season while hitting 19 home runs and stealing 31 bases. Abrams, who would have supplanted Casey Schmitt as the Giants' everyday second baseman, will make $4.2 million this season and comes with 3 years of club control before reaching free agency. The rebuilding Nationals netted 5 prospects when they traded left-hander Mackenzie Gore to the Rangers, and it's believed they're looking for even more to convince them to move Abrams. According to league sources, this is where it gets crazy. Left-handers Carson Wisenhunt, Jacob Bresnahan were among the prospects the Giants and Nationals discussed. So were outfielder Bo Davidson, shortstop Johnny Level, both of whom cracked Baseball America's most recent top 100 prospects. That was released earlier this week. Even if the Giants offered all 5 players for Abrams, it's unclear whether the Nationals would have accepted. He goes on to write, whether it's been discussions with the Nationals over Abrams or the Cardinals for infielder Brendan Donovan, or talks at the winter meetings with the Miami Marlins for right-hander Edward Cabrera, who ended up going to the Cubs, including top outfield prospect as well, it appears the industry hasn't valued the Giants' top minor league talent at a level that matches with the organization's internal evaluations. Boy, is that a surprise? Not really. He then goes on to write, it's been a frustrating and underwhelming offseason. The Giants are likely finished addressing the rotation and all of that. And again, this was written essentially before they traded or they signed Harrison Bader. Acquiring Abrams would have done more than provide a dynamic and athletic presence at the top of the order and on the base paths. It would have allowed the Giants to raise the floor and use Schmitt in a super utility role that could have included some starts at first base against left-handed pitching. Instead, it's back to the drawing board and perhaps to the few free agent fits that remain unsigned. Then Andrew brings up Harrison Bader, and he gets signed a couple days later. All right. So we've talked time and time again about how much prospects matter and how the evaluation of prospects should matter and do matter when you're looking at different trades. And clearly, there was some miscommunication when it comes to the Nationals and the Giants, because in my opinion, that is too much. And apparently that was maybe not enough for the Nationals. You're looking at Josuar, who we've talked about, and he's at the top, not at the top, but he is quickly climbing up all of the prospect lists. Okay. You also include the Bo Davidsons of the world and guys like that. Obviously, the Carson Wisenhunts and those type of guys that are, maybe not the highest ceiling, but they could be ready to go right now. So let me reread you who all was going to be in that deal and whether or not the Nationals said yes or no. It's kind of unclear, as Baggerly says, where the breakdown was. But the Giants, it seems like they did offer these 5 guys, or that's what the Nationals wanted them to offer. I don't know. There was some breakdown within those two conversations. So they wanted Josuar Gonzalez, Johnny Level, Bo Davidson, okay, Jacob Bresnahan, and Carson Wisenhunt. So let's be very clear about this, and let's be very honest about this. Bo Davidson, right, great story at 22 years old, maybe 23 years old. Bo Davidson, that's somebody that you're probably going to have to be willing to part with, okay? Jacob Bresnahan and Carson Wisenhunt, kind of the same idea to me, just in conversations like this. So they had Bo Davidson at 87 on that prospect list, and then you had Johnny Level at 98. That's where this thing gets a little bit squirrely to me. Johnny Level and Josuar, that is kind of the problem to me. And again, whether it was the Giants who said that's too much or whether that was the Nationals that said not enough, I'm okay with not doing this deal. And I would have loved to have CJ Abrams, okay? 25 years old, you lock down. This is a lot different, and that's why it's a different price tag than the Brendan Donovans of the world and the Nico Horners of the world, who are staring at 30 in the face, if not already 30. CJ is 25 years old. You would be starting to build that core of, Bryce Eldridge, of course. Then you'd have CJ, and CJ at 25 years old, a couple years younger than some of the big contracts like Willie Adames and others. They would all be kind of growing together throughout this process. So I think it would have been an outstanding get for the Giants. And look, I don't want to give kudos to anybody that didn't get a deal done, but I do appreciate the Giants going out and trying to find a deal. This is somebody that we haven't really talked about. We've been talking about Brendan Donovan ad nauseum. We've been talking about the Nico Horner stuff as well, guys like that. So the Giants are clearly thinking outside the box. It just didn't work out. And sometimes you're looking at this and you're saying, okay, so we're going to have to not gut our farm system, but you're losing Josuar, which is already a problem. Then you're losing Johnny Level. So you're losing 2 shortstops, and you're losing Bo Davidson, who right now your outfield is pretty thin. So it feels like, to me, the Giants just decided, and obviously 2 pitchers, no disrespect to Jacob Bresnahan and Carson Wisenhunt, and 2 pitchers as well that you might be using in the very, very near future. Carson Wisenhunt was a spot starter for this team last season. So a huge price tag for CJ Abrams. And honestly, if you are the Nationals, I get it. You just got 5 for Mackenzie Gore. And let me take off the black and orange lenses for a second. You have a situation where you're making sure that you're getting everything that you deserve back if you are the Nationals. And 3 years of control is a lot. So you control this guy until he's 28 years old. So I understand why the Nationals had a high price tag. But again, as we talked about the Nationals and their center fielder as well, they also stink right now. So why would you want to move off of young talent? So I think it's no harm, no foul. I'm going to give both of them an E for effort, if you will. The Nationals making sure they got everything, or they asked for everything that they wanted, because maybe they're not in a rush to move on from CJ Abrams, and the Giants giving out a pretty aggressive offer as far as I'm concerned. And the issue being maybe throughout Major League Baseball right now, the Giants, look, they're sitting there in that 18 range as far as their prospects are concerned, and they'll continue to climb up. But until you can get into that top 5, top 7, and every prospect or a lot of these prospects are just considered very, very high level, this is how they're going to be viewed. So yeah, I wanted to give you an update on that CJ Abrams missed opportunity possibly, but that's a lot of prospects. And maybe I'm not the guy. I saw somebody on social media say I'm always okay with trading prospects. Y'all know I'm not necessarily that person, so I'm okay with it, but I'm also not going to sit here and complain if the Giants end up starting Casey Schmitt, because I'm the one who didn't want them to give up 7 prospects for CJ Abrams. Speaking of Casey Schmitt, should he get a chance to start this season? How did we just decide that he was no longer good enough? When did the Giants do that? Let's discuss that in the second segment right here on Locked On Giants. It's the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff. The final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel is making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're backing the favorite, riding with the underdog, or building one last same-game parlay, this is the game everyone's been waiting for. This is where predictions turn into parlays, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. It's a perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. If you're a new customer, bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the season is over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. You already live your team every day. Now take it up a level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On Giants with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more. All for just $5 a month or $50 a year. Go to LockedOnSFGiants.supercast.com or check the link in the show notes to learn more. If you're a true diehard Giants fan, the Everydayer All Access tier is built for you. You'll get one-on-one text access with me, all access episodes, an exclusive newsletter, and a 15% discount to the Locked On merch store. Head to LockedOnSFGiants.supercast.com to join the Everydayer Club and unlock all access. You can also find the link in the show notes. So yeah, I'm not quite sure when things kind of flipped for Casey Schmitt. Maybe the Giants were never that high on him to begin with, but you could look at it this way and say, hey, if they weren't high on him, maybe they would have given up more to get CJ Abrams, and maybe this signals that the Giants are interested in upgrading second base, but they still feel comfortable in going into the 2026 season with Casey Schmitt as their starting second baseman. And there's a reason for them to have some cause to pause before we start thinking that this is disrespectful to Casey Schmitt or anything else. There's been something floating around recently as MLB Network and other outlets do their hot stove top 10 at each position, right? Top 10 rising stars or top 10 players at each position. And when you get to second base, we were reminded that the year prior in 2025, going into the 2025 season, Tyler Fitzgerald was number 6 on that list, either 6 or 7 on that list going into the 2025 season for up-and-coming second baseman or top second baseman at the position. And things did not go the way that everyone had hoped. So the Giants are saying, look, we don't know what we're going to get from Casey Schmitt, but we're going to do our best to put ourselves in a position where we know we're going to get production. So let's take a look back at what Casey Schmitt has done, who he is, and going back to the Andrew Baggerly article, the Giants may be thinking this guy may be more so fit as a super utility guy versus an everyday second baseman, which was who he kind of was prior to last season where Tyler Fitzgerald couldn't figure it out. I mean, if you look at the cachet, he did go in the second round in 2020. It wasn't as if he went in one of these late rounds. So he goes in the second round of the 2020 MLB June amateur draft out of San Diego State. Shout out the Aztecs. And he is about to turn 27, but he'll be a young 27. So he's 26 right now. He turns 27 in March. And if you look at what he's done throughout his career, he is at 228 batting average, 73 runs, 86 RBIs, only 2 stolen bases for his career, 285 on base percentage, 384 slugging, 667 OPS. Last season, in 312 at bats, he had 74 hits, 12 home runs. He hit 237, 34 runs, 40 RBIs, 305 on base percentage, 401 slugging, and a 706 OPS. So, yeah, I mean, if you look at it like that, not too much to write home about. His projections for 2026, 239 batting average, 300 on base percentage, and 405 slugging with a 705 OPS. He's projected to hit 13 home runs and 46 RBIs with 17 doubles, 83 hits. So, you know, you read something like that, and I get it. It is a little bit easier to see why the Giants do want to at least see what else is out there. But I do also feel like you never know what he could be, and you never know what he could become. And if you look at what he took over, maybe not completely fair to look at the full season and look at once he took over as a second baseman, there was a reason he locked it down. There was a reason that revolving door at second base kind of stopped. Now, it took him a while to figure it out, but they had him at other positions. He was still doing the super utility thing. You had Christian Koss in the mix as well. And of course, you had Tyler Fitzgerald start out the season. There were a couple other guys that played second too. So in a similar vein of Luis Matos, once they said, all right, Casey Schmitt, he got hot, and they said, hey, we're just going to rock with you. You did see some improvements. But yeah, if you look at it on its face, it's not a surprise that the Giants are trying to upgrade at that position. I just think that it doesn't necessarily mean that they don't believe in Casey Schmitt at all. So what type of chance should Casey Schmitt get? Well, I think the reality is if he survives this and the Giants are unable to make a trade, and now you have me wanting to refresh everything, but if he survives this and the Giants are unable to make a trade, I think that you'll find yourself in a very similar position to where everyone is going to be looking at him, okay, as the Giants get closer to the trade deadline during the season. So if he comes out hot, I think the Giants would say, hey, we're going to leave you be. We're not going to mess with something if it's working. But if he does come out and struggle, I think he'll find himself in similar conversations. And that's just the nature of the beast, right? Unless you're on one of these huge contracts. And even when you're on these huge contracts, a la Rafi Devers, you're always going to be in the mix to possibly get moved. So, yeah, I think it is not a matter of not believing in him or not wanting to give him a chance, but you can't have it all, right? You can't say, hey, we are going to compete with the Dodgers and the Padres and the rest of the NL. We're going to do all of that, but we love this story in Casey Schmitt. If you think he's truly a guy like that can show up for you, then sure. But, it can't just be about loyalty, if you will, if you think there's an opportunity to go out and get somebody. Because the reality is we don't know what some of these guys are going to do, right? We don't even know what the big money guys are going to do. So if you have an opportunity to upgrade at any of these positions, specifically a questionable one in your mind, you just have to do it. And that's no disrespect. That's no disrespect to Casey Schmitt, but you just have to do it. All right, let's get to the newest and truest top 100 prospects from MLB.com. There is quite the surprise in that one that you do not want to miss. More Locked On Giants coming up. Okay, so as I've mentioned, we're getting closer to the season. So a lot of these prospect lists are coming out to get everybody ready for the season. And I think it's also to give people more of an idea when it comes to the trades and what names might be thrown around, what names did make it, what names didn't make it, things like that. So this is the newest one from ESPN. And I know what you're thinking off top. All right, Alan, you've been teasing something. So what exactly have you been teasing? And what I'm teasing is that for one of the first times that I've seen, Josuar Gonzalez is ranked higher than Bryce Eldridge. Now, some of that might be the fact that he's, younger and he's got that upside. And now Bryce is kind of in an interesting spot where he did already get to the big leagues, even though he's still considered a prospect. But this is one of the first notes or first times that I've seen Josuar over Bryce Eldridge. Okay. So on the list, they have 3, and this is from our guy. This is from Kylie McDaniel. Okay, so he has a couple different names here, and he has the Giants get 3 top 100 guys on the latest top 100 list from Kylie McDaniel, and it is Josuar Gonzalez at 30, Bryce Eldridge at 59. Yeah, that's a little bit interesting, and Johnny Level at 84. So let's go through what Kylie has to say about all of them. And he says this about Josuar Gonzalez: type, exciting young shortstop who could make a Jesus-made level leap this season. Gonzalez was the top prospect to sign from last January's international signees, ranking 177th last season before he played a game. But he's much higher now because of a loud debut in the Dominican Summer League. Some of this stuff we've talked about before. Gonzalez produced 19 extra base hits in 52 games, along with 33 stolen bases, with more walks than strikeouts while playing only shortstop. He's a plus runner who looks like he can stick at shortstop defensively. At the plate, he has above average contact skills and power potential, so the pieces are here to be in the top 10 at this time next year, particularly if he skips the complex league and performs well in 2026 single A. So now you have a different look here with Josuar, a decent bit above Bryce Eldridge. All right, next on the list, let's get to Bryce Eldridge, and he sits at 59. Big league ready, 6'7" with plus power and a decent approach, but little else. Eldridge was a two-way prospect out of high school in the loaded, and I don't know if a lot of people remember that. I know sometimes I got to remind myself. Eldridge was a two-way prospect out of high school in the loaded 2023 draft. He received mid to late first-round projections as a power-hitting first baseman with shocking contact rates against top pitching in the summer. He was also a second-round prospect on the mound with the power fastball slider combo. He has been only a hitter in pro ball and shot through the minors quicker than anyone expected, playing 66 games last year in AAA as a 20-year-old before getting 10 games in the big leagues. Eldridge is a pretty polished prospect for what he is, a hitter with his swing plane approach and other traits geared to get to his power in games. What that means is a 35 or 40 grade hitter, think 230 batting average, with a decent walk rate and 20 to 30 homers. He's a 40 grade runner and below average first baseman. So the question is whether Eldridge would bring enough other than home runs to the table to be a strong everyday type player. Being in the big leagues while players his age are getting ready for their junior year in college is a good signal that he'll reach that, but he could also be at risk of being non-tendered once he's being paid more than the league minimum, because veteran first basemen are not expensive in free agency. Wow, wow, wow. I'm not sure I expected to read all that. And as you can tell, I was kind of reading it live here as we're just reacting to everything. And, it's one of those things where I feel like this happens in football a lot. If you remember a guy by the name of Trevor Lawrence, who had a breakout season this season out there in Jacksonville, sometimes there's a little bit of fatigue. And I'm not accusing Kylie of this, but sometimes there's a little bit of fatigue where you've talked about somebody for so long, you kind of get tired of talking about them a little bit. We do the same thing with LeBron and LeBron fatigue. And I don't know if that's what's going on here or if these are legitimate kind of gripes with Bryce Eldridge. I mean, the reality is, yeah, he is a bit of a one-trick pony, if you will, but that trick might be a really good one. And I think the issue is, when you look at some of these other guys that are the best hitters in the Major League Baseball level, I think the issue is a lot of these guys are starting to control their ability to have decent averages. And I think what Kylie is saying is we might be slowly but surely moving away from the 230s and 220s unless you're hitting 30, 40 home runs a season, and he very well may do that. But I think Kylie is kind of kind of worried about the contact rate, and he's not alone. Specifically, when you're looking at Bryce at first base, which is not necessarily a premium defensive position, and what he could be there. So this thing is going to start to turn, and I'm telling y'all right now, I'm not going to be the one with the pitchfork to say get him out of town, but there is going to be a lot of conversation when it comes to trades. I can tell you that right now. And you know whose fault that is? It's the Giants' fault, because they went out and got Rafi Devers. If you didn't get Rafi Devers, nobody would be talking about this for Bryce Eldridge, right? We had this conversation, I don't know, maybe a month or so ago, right? Not that it makes Bryce Eldridge expendable, but it makes him more expendable than prior to trading for Rafi Devers, and saying, not just trading for Rafi Devers, knowing that you had Matt Chapman at third. So he'd have to play first. So don't blame me or anybody else when this stuff continues to come out about trades, because the Giants have put themselves in this position. All right, last but not least, let's get to the last name on this list, Johnny Level, who we recently had talked about, but let's see what Kylie has to say about Johnny Level. High probability big leaguer who can really punish a mistake pitch. So he says, funny enough, Johnny Level's swing is decently level. He should actually add more loft to make the most of his above average raw power. He's pretty maxed out physically and is more of a fine runner, defender, and thrower. So he'll probably slide over to second base at some point. He's ranked here despite his limited tools, age, and playing only 31 games in full season ball, because Level can really hit and he has a good feel for the game. I think there's above average contact, on base skills, and raw power, along with enough field to get about 15 to 20 homers while stealing a few bags. He had 21 last year and playing the infield. It's not an enormous upside, but he's a safe bet to move quickly through the minors and be a decent big leaguer. Okay, well, I mean, that doesn't, and he's a switch hitter as well. He's at 84. Okay, so obviously the ceiling maybe not as high. And this is the type of stuff that when you then go back to the CJ Abrams botched trade, maybe that's what they're thinking. So you're not including Bryce Eldridge, which fair enough if you don't want to. Josuar is really the ticket there, because you have somebody in Johnny Level who is not right now looking like a high ceiling big leaguer, and then you have Carson Wisenhunt, who's also not necessarily a high ceiling big leaguer. So you can start to see from the Nationals' perspective that maybe they thought, hey, you're giving us a lot from a quantity perspective with 5 prospects, but the quality and what we're expecting as far as where CJ Abrams is in his ceiling compared to some of these guys that you want to include in the deal outside of Josuar Gonzalez, who again is just making his way up. It's not as if he's as established as even a Bryce Eldridge. Maybe you can start to see why that deal did not come to fruition. See, I tied it all together at the very end. Thank you for listening to Locked On Giants. Thank you for watching Locked On Giants. Be sure to follow me on social media at @_Styles Files, Styles with an I. If you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On Giants ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. Head to LockedOnSFGiants.supercast.com to join the club. For those of you on video, we send you to the first ever 24/7 National Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. On audio, make sure you make your second listen Locked On MLB. We will talk to you tomorrow. Until then, peace.